What's the number one issue that British voters care about? Well, luckily for me, it's usually the economy. But number two, and sometimes the top spot, is, of course, immigration. Immigration becoming such an issue in voters' minds has turned British politics on its head. It's why the Reform Party and Nigel Farage are trouncing everyone else in the polls. And in fact, Reform's main policy offer is to bring Britain down to net zero migration. But I've got some news today that could turn that argument completely on its head, that could change the entire British political debate. In this year, 2026, we could already hit that net zero migration point. We could already hit that point where more people are leaving the country than coming here. Happy New Year and welcome to Reality Check. Less spin, more stats. I'm Michael Simmons, the Spectator's economics editor. Now, at the end of last year, there was lots going on in the news when it came to, economics and all sorts of statistical news. But something that got a bit less attention was the numbers on net migration. The latest release from the Office for National Statistics looks at the year to June 2025. And that showed that net migration has already collapsed, some 78% down from its peak in the Boris wave. And in fact, if you look at where the Office for Budget Responsibility had forecast net migration to be for the rest of this Parliament, we seem to have already gone below that level. So already there seems to be less migration than expected. But rather than the news being welcomed, it led to headlines of, an exodus from Britain. And this was because if you looked at the components of net migration, which is obviously immigration and emigration combined, it wasn't just that migration to Britain was coming down because of tighter visa regulations and tighter controls at the border. It's because there was a surge in people leaving the country, a surge in emigration, which helped bring that net figure down. Now, that led to claims that there was a British brain drain. And I'll admit, I got excited about this. I saw the headline figure. I put a graph together that showed that among Brits leaving the country, it did seem to be the younger Brits that were leaving. And sure enough, maybe there was an exodus. But there were two facts that I and others missed. Firstly, we've never had this age breakdown before. It may just be that whenever people leave the country, it always tends to be the younger people going. Grandparents are unlikely to emigrate en masse. For the first time, the ONS provided this age breakdown of those emigrating. And for a minute, it did seem to support the idea of this British brain drain. If you looked at Brits emigrating, it tended to be the younger people that were going, suggesting, that young people have had enough. And this added to stories that we've reported on before about the wealth exodus. And we certainly know that aspect of it is true. There's still all this evidence coming in about the wealthy leaving Britain. Bloomberg had a story just this week about private family offices shutting down because more and more of the wealthiest people are leaving the country. But I and others missed two important factors. The first was that this is the first time that ONS had ever provided that age breakdown. So it may just be that it's always normal that the people leaving the country are young. It may not be a new thing. But the more important number was when you looked behind that emigration figure, you could actually see the nationalities of the people leaving. And apart from a methodology change, which brings all the numbers up, the number of Brits leaving the country has actually remained flat for the last few years. So there's no evidence of a British brain drain. How then could the emigration number be going up so much that it was bringing net migration down towards zero? Well, that's because there was a surge in non-EU and non-British migrants leaving the country. And that seems to support the theory that the Boris wave perhaps is already beginning to undo itself. People that came here as the world opened up after COVID to do degrees or for short-term work have had enough and are heading back. It could go even further than that. The Times have been doing stories about this work from the University of Warwick, where if you look at the tightened visa regime that was tightened up at the dying days of the Conservative government and has been tightened up a bit more by Labour, if you project those visa figures onto that net migration number, 2026 looks like it might be the year where we hit that net zero migration point, where more people leave the country than come to it. Now, we won't know for a fact that that's happened until 2027, but all the indicators will be there, and that could completely change politics. By the end of this parliament, there'll be more deaths every year in Britain than babies being born. Now, they already are sort of near enough, and the country only grows at the moment because of migration. But if we get to a point where we have net zero migration and we have more deaths than births, then far from the story of Britain right now being a growing country with migration as the salient issue, we could flip to a country that's got a shrinking population. And as I keep saying, that could turn politics on its head. Legal migration is only one part of the picture, and tightening visa restrictions is one thing. But if we get to that net zero point without addressing illegal migration, which is something that British voters understandably are affected and care about, then actually Labour might not see that political win. Look at small boats. Last year was the second busiest year on record in the English Channel for people coming here illegally. And if the government isn't able to address that too, then migration will remain an issue at the top of voters' minds. Thanks for listening to Reality Check. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on YouTube, tap the bell so you never miss an episode. If you're listening on podcasts, on Spotify or Apple or wherever you listen to your podcasts, then follow so you don't miss those episodes too. And don't forget, we've got a newsletter that goes out every single Friday. And for all the information on that, go to spectator.co.uk/realitycheck.